She walked into the courtroom with the confidence of someone who thought it would all end there. Hair neatly styled, calm expression, no hesitation in her gaze. To anyone watching, it seemed she was about to walk out acquitted, as if none of it truly affected her. She smiled faintly, took a deep breath, and waited. There was no confession, no apology, just the certainty that she could convince everyone, or at least confuse them. But then the video was played, and everything collapsed. The silence in the room was immediate, as if the oxygen had vanished. On the screen, the car accelerates, crosses the empty street, picks up speed, and hits a concrete wall at nearly 100 miles per hour, with no sign of braking, no attempt to swerve. It was the record of the deaths of two young men, Dominic Russo and Devon Flanagan. And it was also the end of the lie Mackenzie had built up to that point. The collision happened at dawn on a Sunday in July 2022. Strongsville was still asleep when a Toyota Camry appeared at high speed through an industrial zone of the city. Behind the wheel, Mackenzie, then 17. Dominic, her 20-year-old boyfriend, in the front seat. In the back, Devon, 19, a friend of the couple who had just accepted a ride that night. The violence of the crash destroyed the car completely. The engine was thrown backward, doors twisted, dashboard crushed. Dominic and Devon died instantly. Mackenzie, by a miracle, survived, unconscious, trapped in the wreckage, with minor injuries considering the severity of the accident. At first, it seemed like a classic case of recklessness, teenagers driving under the influence, speeding through the night. But as initial details emerged, the picture changed. The vehicle left no skid marks. There was no sliding, no sign that anything went out of control. Just continuous acceleration, recorded second by the car's black box. The investigation revealed that the accelerator pedal had been pressed to the floor and held there until the moment of impact. She didn't lose control. She never tried to prevent the crash. What investigators began piecing together, bit by bit, was far more serious. Not a mistake. Not carelessness. But a decision. Mackenzie didn't speak to police in the first days. She claimed mental confusion, trauma, memory loss. When she began to defend herself, she insisted it had all been a tragic accident. She said she didn't remember what happened. Maybe she had been distracted, tired, or even panicked. Her lawyer spoke of accidental acceleration, possible interference from the boyfriend, and finally, a youthful emotional reaction in crisis. But there was one thing none of these explanations could justify: the video. Days before the crash, Mackenzie had been recorded driving the same street, along the same route, with the same acceleration pattern. Prosecutors called it a rehearsal, a practice run. Then came testimonies from close friends, revealing that she had threatened Dominic on multiple occasions, that their relationship had been volatile, marked by fights and dangerous statements. One witness reported that Mackenzie had said, "I'm going to crash this car with him inside." The phrase, which had seemed like an exaggeration at the time, gained new weight after the tragedy. The family's pain began to pour through the courtroom walls. Devon's mother, devastated, said her son had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dominic's mother cried not only for the loss of her son, but for having trusted Mackenzie as if she were family. Both described the feeling of betrayal, not just for the death, but for the way everything had been covered up with a manipulated, cold narrative far from the truth. Mackenzie appeared before the judge months later, now 19. She sat in the defendant's chair with the same calm she had shown entering that car on that fateful night. During the trial, she did not apologize. She showed no remorse. She continued to insist it was an accident. But the video, the black box, and the testimonies told a different story. And when the judge read the sentence, silence once again filled the room. Only this time, it was followed by tears. Not from the families, but from Mackenzie. For the first time, she cried like someone who understood she would not go home. The video played in court became the centerpiece of the entire case. In it, silence is more disturbing than any scream. The security camera, positioned on a quiet Strongsville, Ohio street, captured the last moments of Dominic Russo and Devon Flanagan lives. What is seen is a black Honda Civic entering the frame, slowing briefly, then accelerating to full force. No audible screams. No braking. No attempt to steer away. Just a straight line into a concrete wall, and a sudden violent impact. Mackenzie Shirilla, the young driver, survived with multiple injuries, hip fractures, concussion, and internal trauma. She was removed unconscious from the car and rushed to the hospital. When she woke days later, investigators questioned her about what had happened that morning of July 31, 2022. She said she remembered nothing. She said she loved Dominic, would never hurt him, and that the car must have had a mechanical problem. At first, police did not rule out that possibility. But upon inspecting the vehicle's control system, they found every mechanism in perfect condition. The accelerator, the brake, the tires, the collision sensors. Nothing indicated a malfunction. The crash had been intentional, or at least, that's what the telematics data showed. During the 3 seconds before impact, the car was being manually accelerated to a final speed of 100 miles per hour. No brake was ever applied. It was at that moment that the prosecution decided to cross-reference these data with the contents of Mackenzie's phone. And what they found there transformed the case from a tragic accident into a double homicide investigation. Mackenzie had sent dozens of obsessive messages to Dominic in the days leading up to the crash. Some of them appeared as disguised threats. In one she wrote, "You're playing with fire, and I'm not the kind to burn alone." In another she stated, "If you don't want me anymore, fine. But don't think you'll get out unscathed." The tone was clearly manipulative, loaded with emotional blackmail. Most serious of all, she had researched online terms like how to make someone feel guilt to the end, and what happens to the body after a frontal collision. For the jury, all of this painted a devastating psychological portrait. Mackenzie was not just a teenager shaken by the end of a relationship. She was in emotional collapse, using that collapse as justification for an extreme act. The lead prosecutor, in her closing argument, was categorical. She turned a car into a weapon. And the victims trusted her, slept in the back seat. There was no escape. It was an execution. Devon Flanagan, the second occupant of the car, was a promising young man, passionate about sports, music, and photography. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. For his family, the tragedy was even crueler. He had no direct involvement in the crisis between Mackenzie and Dominic. He was there only to spend the night with friends, unaware that his life would end in an abandoned warehouse with no chance to defend himself. Mackenzie's defense tried to argue that she suffered from severe depression and needed psychological treatment, not punishment. But this argument lost weight in light of the fact that, after the crash, she never showed genuine remorse. In videos posted months earlier, Mackenzie appeared laughing, joking about dying of love, and one video drew investigators' attention. During a live stream with friends, she mockingly said she would die with Dominic, or nobody would die. It was hard to know how much these statements were typical youthful dramatizations, and how much they were a harbinger of what was to come. The judge stated, in reading the sentence, that her behavior was calculated, deliberate, and cruel. He said that, even though young, Mackenzie demonstrated full capacity to distinguish right from wrong, and chose destruction. The sentence was read in a packed courtroom. Family members of the victims cried silently. Mackenzie, upon hearing the murder conviction, collapsed. She cried as if only in that moment did she grasp the gravity of what she had done. It was a desperate cry, from someone who had expected leniency and found justice instead. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with no chance of parole before that. The judge emphasized that the sentence was not only for justice for the victims, but also as a warning to anyone who romanticizes the idea of dying for love. After the sentence was read, Dominic's father spoke. His voice shook, but the words were direct. "She destroyed my family. She killed my son. But at least now, he will rest knowing the world saw the truth." Mackenzie left the courthouse in handcuffs. Her attorneys did not immediately appeal. Her silence as the police led her away contrasted with the arrogance she had shown in the early days of the trial. The young woman who had walked into court confident she could sway the jury with tears now faced the definitive cost of her own choices. The verdict not only sealed Mackenzie Shirilla's fate but also shed light on a question that continues to haunt courts, schools, and families. What drives an apparently ordinary young woman, with no history of violence, to commit such an extreme act? This question, endlessly repeated by commentators, psychologists, and the public, remains without a definitive answer. Mackenzie did not fit the classic profile of someone who poses a threat. But beneath the surface, there were ignored signs, minimized behaviors, and a series of decisions that, brick by brick, built the inevitable tragedy. In court, the defense tried to maintain the theory that it had all been a tragic accident. They claimed Mackenzie might have had a seizure before losing control of the car. But the prosecution emphatically dismantled that version, pointing out that there was no medical evidence of epileptic episodes. Her medical history was clean, and no medication suggested such a condition. More than that, if she really had a seizure, why was the acceleration constant, with no sign of braking? Why was the turn executed precisely, as if she knew exactly where she was going? The judge had no doubt in declaring that Mackenzie Shirilla used the car as a weapon. And although she was sentenced as an adult, the weight of youth still resonated throughout the courtroom. She had been 17 when she committed the crime. And even with the coldness of the footage, the brutality of the crash, and the family's irreparable pain, it was impossible to ignore the contrast between the girl who once dreamed of the future and the young woman now caged for decades. Mackenzie received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole only after 15 years, long enough for the life she knew to cease existing. In the days following the trial, the crash video began circulating widely on social media, fueled by public outrage and the visual impact of the footage. Mackenzie's coldness in court, combined with the brutal evidence of the video, created an emotional storm in the public. It was not just about justice. It was about betrayal, illusion, and a sense of impunity that was brutally crushed in front of cameras. The images became a cruel reminder that even in the closest relationships, darkness can lurk, and that a decision made in seconds can destroy multiple lives forever. The case also raised delicate discussions about reverse abusive relationships. Close friends of Dominic and Devon claimed that Mackenzie displayed signs of control and manipulation within the relationship. According to testimonies, she was jealous, impulsive, and had previously made verbal threats. But no one imagined it could escalate to something so extreme. What had once been seen as a temperamental teenager was now interpreted as a warning sign that had been ignored. The trial exposed not only Mackenzie's errors, but also the silences and omissions of those around her. In the end, what shocks most is not only the brutality of the act, but Mackenzie's conviction that she would go unpunished. She smiled in the weeks leading up to the trial, posted on social media, and reportedly said she was confident everything would end well. Perhaps she truly believed she could manipulate the narrative, that her age, appearance, and demeanor would convince the jury. But none of that survived the raw, irrefutable force of the video. The story of Mackenzie Shirilla is not just about a crime committed by a teenager. It is a dark portrait of how ego, impulsivity, and belief in false immunity can collide with reality in devastating ways. Dominic and Devon had no choice. They were victims of a decision they could neither foresee nor prevent. And Mackenzie, who believed she was in control until the very last second, was crushed by her own arrogance. Today, as she serves her sentence, Mackenzie has become a symbol, not of pure villainy, but of a complete collapse of responsibility. She is remembered not only for what she did, but for how she tried to deny it until the end. And that is precisely what makes this story so disturbing. The illusion that everything was under control, until the truth, raw and silent, emerged in a video no one could ignore. The question that echoes beyond the courthouse walls remains: how many other stories like this are unfolding right now, invisible, beneath layers of apparent normalcy? And how many of these tragedies could be prevented if only we were willing to see the signs before the final impact?